Yeah.
Just a few words.
Can I give you a
Can he-
microphone so it will make sure it goes into...
Just use this.
Yeah, so it will go into the streaming.
Can I just use
Yeah,
it?
はい。
Should get started.
はい、どうぞ。
はい、ありがとうございます。
Jason, you good?
We're good?
Jason, you good? Good?
Great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for the Composers Forum session here at 4 o'clock. We will be going from 4 to 5 p.m., perhaps a little bit longer, depending on how the discussion goes. I'm sure it'll be very interesting. My name is Ko Mizaki. I'm a professor of music here at the where is this? University of California, Irvine Department of Music, and my area is the Integrated Composition, Improvisation, and Technology PhD program area. So we have a wonderful session here with panelists and our moderator, Louise Toppin, here to guide us through this session, so I will pass the microphone on to you.
Thank you so much. I am honored to have these wonderful colleagues on the stage and also some other colleagues that are in the room. What we're going to do is we're going to rotate. So we're going to start with the group that's up here, and I know there are other composers, and as they come in the room, that will form group 2. But even as some come off the stage and the other group comes on the stage, I hope we'll continue the conversation between you. I didn't divide you in any specific way, except I wanted to start with some of the more published, is that okay? More published composers in different ways. Well, or some who've been, we're doing different things. So we have some earlier published and some later published. How about that? We'll put ourselves that way. It's not about age. Diane, hey. So she'll join the next group, and I know Sean is coming. There's Marvin Mills. So see, we're gonna be sort of mixed up in terms of who's in group 1. So you're not late. Marvin and Diane, you'll be in group 2. We're gonna rotate into the different composers. Okay? Thank you. So I'd like to start with, first, would you introduce yourself, and would you just briefly talk about one of the pieces that you've written that inspired you, and someone whose work inspired you? Your name, who you are inspired by, and what is one of the pieces that you are or proudest of. Let's think of it that way. Let's start on the end with Dr. Curtis, please. Excuse me, Dean Emeritus Curtis.
Thank you. I'm Marvin Curtis. I am the Dean Emeritus of the Racklin School of the Arts at IU South Bend. I was inspired by Lena McLinn, who was my high school choir director back in the 60s. I was in her high school choir at Harlan High School, and at that time she was, had not published yet, but we sang her Glory, Glory, Hallelujah in manuscript. And that was I was about 15 years old, and it was a very exciting experience for me to see a woman, a black woman, a live woman, and we were in her choir singing her music. And I thought, wow, maybe I can do that someday. My proudest moment is that I'm the composer of the City on the Hill that was premiered at President Clinton's inauguration in 1993. And that was an experience because I had the United States Marine Band and Philander Smith Collegiate Choir, and I was the first African American to have a peace commission for a presidential inauguration.
Thank you for that. And before our next person, because some other composers came in the room, I'm just letting everybody know we're coming up in groups of 2. So if anybody else has come in the room that's a composer, just let me know. I see those 2 over there, and so we'll shift in about 20 more minutes to group 2.
My name is Rosephanie Powell, and I am at Auburn University. And I would say that although there are numerous composers who inspired me, I would say that William Grant Still and Undine Smith Moore. William Grant Still because I did my research on his art songs, and then Undine Smith Moore, again, for the same reason. I think that getting to know her works, an African American female in undergraduate school, that was my experience with her was the first time that I had experienced an African American female composing art songs, and she really made a difference in my life.
Good afternoon. My name is Sylvia Hollyfield, formerly of Michigan State University. I am retired, so I'm letting everyone here know that that can happen. My composing might become a little differently because I would say that the seeds were planted by my parents. And I want to give homage to them. My father really loved Nathaniel Dett. I grew up listening to things like Listen to the Lambs. And as a very small child, I always heard James Weldon Johnson's The Creation. And so that was one of the inspirations that has remained with me my entire life. And then there's another gentleman in the room that I would like to pay homage to, which was my college professor, Robert Harris. So I will stop there. Thank you.
And the composition that you were...
I think the composition that I like the best will be To Artina.
Okay.
And I will stop there.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Andre Myers, he, him, his. I am a music professor at the University of Redlands. Yeah. What's up? I got some of my students with me, yo. So we're right down the road. In terms of inspirations, there are three figures who are really inspirational in my musical journey. The first and foremost is sitting right up here. His name is Willis Patterson. He was the dean. He inspires all of us, but Dean Willis Patterson, who needs a statue erected in his honor. The second is Dr. William Banfield, who some of you may also know, who was my mentor in high school when I was a high schooler, and he was a first year, and he was a graduate student at the University of Michigan when I was growing up there in Ann Arbor. And then the third person is Dr. Kira Gaunt, who, wonderful ethnomusicologist and just multidisciplinary musical artist. So those three, she, as a graduate student, sang my songs when I was a high schooler. Yes. Right? Yes. So this was before her PhD, before her TED Talk, before all of the wonderful multidisciplinary work that she is engaged in now. She was as wonderful now as she was as wonderful then as she is now. In terms of the work that excites me about my own work, I did some work recently for the Albany Symphony around the life of Frederick Douglass, which was a piece that engaged high schoolers and had them emceeing his sort of words about his life, and that was helpful for me as both a musical artist, a composer, and as an educator to kind of bring all of the things that I love together in one. And so I hope to continue doing work on the life of Frederick Douglass. It's really valuable for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you three will kind of hold into that one.
I'm Maria Thompson Corley, and if I'm talking about influences, I guess I've been influenced by so many different kinds of music. Growing up, my mom was very much listened to a lot of classical music. My dad listened to reggae and jazz and all kinds of different things, so I feel like I absorbed all of these different influences, and I think as far as if I'm going to get more specific, well, I can't get more specific. I'll say last time I was here, I did not think of myself as a composer, even though Daryl Taylor, I have to give him props for convincing me that I am a composer, because I really had to be given permission to think of myself in that way, and it's very recent. I was a pianist, and this much of my life I've been thinking of myself as a composer. So I'm amazed that I'm sitting here, honestly. If I had to pick one piece, I think I'm Not an Angry Black Woman, because it was my poem, and I just was feeling so much, and I know so many people can understand this feeling of so much stuff that we've been bombarded with, and to be able to come up with music for that particular poem, which I didn't intend to set to music, was kind of a deep experience, and so I'm grateful that people have responded to it and have responded to my music.
Hello, my name is B.E. Boykin, and I'm based in Atlanta, currently an assistant professor of music at Georgia Tech. And gosh, I think kind of like Maria, I think 5 years ago, this was my first African American Art Song Alliance conference attending. And I was really young in my career and in school, and I think I submitted a few art songs, and Dr. Taylor accepted them graciously, and they were performed, but I don't think I considered myself to be a composer at that time. And I had the esteemed honor of meeting Dorothy Redmore. And I remember asking her, like, okay, you know, how can I be a composer? Or like, you know, what can I do? And she just said the words that kind of put me on the trajectory that I am now. So I owe everything to her in encouraging me to be a composer. So I'm very grateful for that. And I think the piece would be, for me, Storyteller. It's an SATB quartet piece with piano. And it was commissioned by a group in Alaska, but it's probably one of my favorites.
Thank you. Feel like I'm in the Four Tops or something. Okay. Temptations. All right. Ain't too proud to beg, really. I'm not. By my music. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry. I'm a comedian, too. I'm sorry. Tragically. I am Dave Ragland. I'm a composer, vocalist. In another life, I was an accountant. Two, I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee. And I have to give credit to the great Mrs. Diana Poe, choir master at Tennessee State University, now retired, for taking in a young, frail, skinny boy from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and really exposing him to the works of Nathaniel Dett and Hall Johnson. And that just opened my eyes, and it was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna put a little thumbtack in this. And sure enough, some years later, after my accounting career ended, I came back to it. And I have to say that, like, Clarence Cameron White has been a big influence. Julia Perry, Margaret Bonds, again, Hall Johnson. It's very much, you know, what would Jesus do? What would Clarence Cameron White do? In this situation, I very much asked that. What would Julia Perry do? Yeah, they've saved me in a couple of compositions. Okay, but I'm very much grateful for those influences, as long as my church influence too as well. I could not neglect Rose of Sharon Missionary Baptist Church at 2001 Blackford Street in Chattanooga, Tennessee, as well as New Monumental Missionary Baptist Church in 901 Woodmore Lane in Chattanooga, Tennessee, for having that upbringing and background, really introducing me to the music of the Barrett Sisters, of Clara Ward and Mahalia Jackson. So when you hear my music, you hear a lot of that, and I love like Richard Smallwood. So he's been a big musical influence too. And I got to meet him, I was like, Richard, I love you, and like, who are you? That's right. But all of that has played a very big part, in my composition, and you hear it in Calvary, one of the songs earlier, compositions that kind of put me on the map. It's an I Believe, very much so, and my opera One Vote One that I wrote for Nashville Opera, which has probably been my biggest large work to date.
Thank you all. As you can see, the variety of pieces that they are proudest of or thinking of at this moment, and that their inspirations are wide and varied. I'd like to ask all of you, which ones of you were pianists? Can you raise your hand if you started as a pianist? Raise them high. So see how many started as pianists. Okay, lower your hands. How many started as a performer or singer? So Dave and Rosephine. So it's okay. And Maria and B.E. both spoke about not knowing that they were a composer yet. And so the journey, how many of you started early in your career? And Sylvia as well, I think you were not considering yourself a composer early on. How many of you knew from, by, hitting college, you knew you wanted to be a composer? So he's actually the exception. I knew that. Andre is the one that went to college when did you start studying composition?
I started studying composition.
How old were you?
I was 14.
So he's the exception as a 14-year-old. But for the rest of you, average age, you started dabbling?
I did take a year of composition when I was 14 years
Good.
old. I didn't think of myself, again, as a composer. I was just allowed to do a lot of different things. My parents were very, very supportive of so much stuff.
Right.
So that was 1 year. And when I think about it, my brother was an actor and did films, little Super 8 films, and he had me doing film scores when I was about 10. I don't know if that counts, but I didn't really think of that as, it all seemed trivial.
Absolutely.
But it's like telling stories and painting pictures and that to me is what it is. You're cinematically, the words are being paired with music in a way that reminds me of film, in a sense.
Absolutely. The journey starts in different places. Marvin, you have your hand.
I was in college and wrote a piece as an exercise, and my college choir director said, "I like this, write another one." So I did, and we went on tour with my music. And I was a junior in college, the only black person in the choir, scared to death. But we went to California, Oregon, and Washington State, and over to Minneapolis, singing my music every night. And so I thought, this might work. But I was a piano major. I was a music ed major. And so I thought, I'll never make a living doing this. I still haven't. But that got me started. That somebody encouraged me to do that.
Absolutely, and I wanted to say that in case there were any people in the audience that may be on the path or interested in the path that you are now on. Can you raise your hand if your first composition was a song? So an art song. An art song. So is that Rosephine? Is the only one that started as an art song? Were the rest of you, were they choral works?
Yeah, choral work.
How many were choral works? Okay. How many were an instrumental work? Was it a piano work?
No, it was piano.
What was yours, Andre?
It was piano and flute when I was in 8th grade.
Piano and flute?
Yeah.
Okay. What was yours, B.E.?
So maybe I was more of a songwriter back in like elementary, middle school, and that's where I think the composing kind of started, but back in my day we called it making beats. So
That's okay. B, I feel you. What people don't know is I wrote pop songs as a child. I have tapes and tapes of pop songs that I wrote that my parents were like, would you please stop? Because back in the day, I had to take the tape recorder and record myself and then take another tape recorder and record. I had 6, 7, or 8 tracks of me. Yeah, they will never see the light of day. As I start to get frail, they're going to be burned. Okay, so,
I think mine might just be a little bit different.
Sure,
when we
please.
talked about the first one, it was instrumental. It was called Song for M. It was for a jazz quintet that I wrote it. It is published. It's with the Detroit Collective. I had no idea what I was doing. They played it, we recorded it, it worked. So that would be my first one. And then I went on a hiatus for a long time. So I'm just impressed and everything to be sitting on this stage with people whose work I already know. So I'm just glad just to be here.
Thank you for saying that and talking to us about it. So we're all at a conference about art song. What gives you hope about the longevity of art song? Or is there something that gives you hope or inspires you? I'll let you answer this 2 ways. What gives you hope? And the other is, have you discovered a story or a poem or something that you are dying to write into a vocal piece?
I've been inspired here today, yesterday and today, because I didn't grow up with art songs. I grew up with the spirituals.
Right.
And we never studied art songs till I got to college. I was like, why? But, so we didn't study any black composers. And then I started hearing them, and what I heard yesterday and what I heard this morning, it takes my breath away, because that's a form. I'm a scriptural writer, so I use text usually from the Bible. And there's a lot of text in the scriptures that are great art songs, you know. But this conference has opened my eyes to what is out there, and there are some young people out here who are doing some amazing things. And I heard stuff this morning that just knocked my socks off, and I thought I should be doing that, but let them do it instead. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would definitely say that I'm very much inspired because there's always something to be said. I think we found out in 2020, you know, we all had to go into hiding and everybody was excluded. And then we have the death of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. It's like, no, I got to say something. And I need to say it now. So, you know, there's a story. There's always a story. And as long as people are willing to share their story, you know, there's always an impetus, a drive for a creation. I'm a tragic social media nerd. I would get more done if I stayed off of the IG and the Facebook, I know. But when I see people's stories, sometimes I'm like, wow, that could be a song. And I'm like DMing, like, excuse me, you don't know me, but can I borrow this? You know, I'll give you rights, I'll give you publishing, I promise. But you know, there's always a story, and it's not that the poetry has died, it's just that it's evolved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So society has made, okay, Andre, go ahead.
Very briefly, yeah, I'm very encouraged by art song. I always have been. It's my home. And so it's such a lovely thing to be able to be here and celebrate with friends, and new friends, old friends. And the thing that inspires me about art song is that its past is tied to the heart and to the land, right? That's where art song lives. It's where it lives in any language and any genre. It lives in the heart and it lives on the land. And that's where black people live, at least in the Americas. They live in the heart and they live on the land. And so for us to celebrate culturally our experience in art song seems only natural, because it allows for us to celebrate our place in our hearts, the places in our hearts and the places in the land.
So he handed me the mic. I guess I say something. As I listen to everybody, I want everybody just for a second to think about your elementary school music experience. And I want you to think of the songs that you were singing in your elementary school experience. If any of the songs that you learned at that time spoke to you, about you, raise your hand. Okay, that's very good, because all of us did not have that experience. So when you talk about art songs and what it does, it justifies who we are as people. It tells our story, whether you know the person or not. It tells our story. And as Marvin was talking about all of the things that we've heard these last couple of days, it feels like we've been here for months. But when you think about the songs, and I see people like B.E., who I've met virtually, but I just met her, or the work that I heard you do, Maria, the other night, it's heartfelt. And that's our story. And we don't tell our story. We don't. And some of us just don't know it. So when you talk about art songs, it is the songs that are the art that is us. And that's why we have to tell the story. We have to tell the story.
Thank you. Maria?
Yeah, I have just one quick thing to add, which is that I'm grateful that there's an opportunity now for people not to feel that there's so many boundaries as far as when I've been talking to a number of people about my lack of hierarchy, and it's just, if it speaks from the heart to me, that's what makes it art. So for the ones who want to incorporate all these different kinds, and Manita, I heard a little bit of the beginning of her talk virtually, which was, you know, what is appropriate, what is art, what is whatever. I mean, I think it's good that more and more people are having the freedom to just express these words in whatever way that speaks to them, and bring in whoever is touched by those, the way that we express, so that we're not so focused on, is this classical, is this not classical, is this whatever. It's just what we bring to music, and hopefully you get it, you share it with us, and we're not so concerned about, you know, categorizing it. That's me anyway.
Thank you, Maria. And I want to ask B.E. and Rosephine, who haven't had a chance to speak for a second, has your writing changed as things have changed in the world in the last 2-3 years? Did that affect, and any of you can say yes or no, did it affect what you write, how you're writing?
I would say, at least for me, yes. I mean, again, 5 years ago, I was kind of in between of thinking of myself as a composer or not, and figuring out, well, you know, does my voice matter? Do I have something to say? Does my music have something to say? And so I think once you're able to get comfortable in that as a composer, yeah, your music changes, your voice changes, and so with the world changing, yeah, it's been a lot, but yeah, I think all of that plays a part, for sure.
Thank you. And Rosephine, I know the piece we sang last night, yesterday afternoon, you said that was a part of the moment. Did more in your writing change?
Right. You know, what has happened in the last few years, even as we see what is occurring within our country, my writing has changed, and I think it has changed to become more of a voice, I hope, for bringing us together. And so I try to pick texts that address what's going on with the world, but hopefully in bringing us together. So whether it's then, here, and now, tonight some will hear the word Langston Dreams. I tend to pick poetry that addresses what has been happening within the African American culture that is not so positive, and yet at the end the poet always comes to a positive place, which is why I love Langston Hughes. There is always that tension between where he was living and what he was experiencing, but his hope for the future and for the world. So I think you find that in Miss Wheatley's Garden, you find that in Then, Here, and Now, and you find that in the Langston Dreams.
Thank you so much. Before we switch over to the other group, the last question I'd like to ask you all is, what advice would you like to give to those coming behind you? I mean, you're in different stages of your own careers, but what would you say to the next singers, pianists, musicologists? What do you say to the next generation, or those behind you?
Do not be afraid.
Thank you.
Do not let folk tell you you can't do this, and do not doubt yourself to where you let fear overtake the creative process. Many of us, I was one of those people that thought, I can't do this. Mm-hmm. And then you sit on top of a podium and you watch people do your music and you realize that you can't do it. But fear will stop you if you let it. Don't let fear get to you. Thank you.
Let's go down the aisle, please. I'd like every voice.
I would say allow one's journey to develop. And what I mean by that is, originally I wanted to be a song composer, but I was hearing no from all of the publishers and was submitting my works, and I think because they were based on African American texts, I was getting no. But the door for choral music was opening in that I had an opportunity to submit a work, and someone immediately submitted it to a publisher. So I was getting no's, even as a singer. I've told the story several times how I was told, hey, you're a lyric soprano. You better find something else to do because they're a dime a dozen. I mean, I could have taken that to say, oh, woe is me, my life is over. But understanding that God had given me other gifts and talents, allowing myself to go down the journey for the doors that were opening. And here on the backside of my career, after doing well in choral music, which was not my focus, choral music, being a composer for choral music, then opened the door for publishers to say, I will accept your work. Because the thing was, they would say, hey, we don't make money off of solo music because teachers tend to copy the music. So they wouldn't even give it much consideration. But once they saw the success, once they saw the success of the choral works, they then said, hey, we'll do a quick run. And thank you all, those of you who bought Miss Wheatley's Garden, because of the success of that work. The doors open. So I say, don't think one closed door means the end. Walk through the ones that open, and over time, if that's what your journey is to be, those other doors will start to open too.
Thank you.
I guess I'll follow through with the doors. There's a door that has two sides. You determine which side of that door you want to be on. The door can be open or the door can be closed, but it's all in here about how you look at the door, because the door is always there. Don't be afraid to open the door, because that's where all the possibilities are.
Thank you.
I'm a witness.
Doors are opening forever. That's real. So I would say, I just want to echo these remarks and associate myself with these remarks, because this time period, the last few years, have been so isolating. And they have made many of us feel really isolated, especially composers who are already, pretty isolating folks. I mean, I could only speak for myself. I'm already shy enough and introverted enough. So and I'm speaking really to myself here, reach out to others. Reach out to others. Even if you're scared, reach out to others. Allow yourself to be vulnerable and say hello to others. I mean, my students, they know I'm having them write letters. I learned that from Kira Gaunt. They're writing letters to people that they admire. Reach out to people that you admire, and everyone benefits from that, especially as the times are trying to divide us more and more. Don't let the times divide you. You're gonna have to work harder now to make associations and celebrate each other, but we're not gonna let them win. We celebrate each other. We got to celebrate each other.
Really quickly, I think I had to learn to not be afraid to grow as I go along, in the sense that obviously the first thing you write may be your greatest piece, but that's probably not the way it's going to be. So it has to do with not being afraid and just realizing that I can build, I can learn, I can continue to grow, and I hope that I never stop building, learning, continuing to grow as I develop, and not being afraid of, okay, I'm not the perfect composer yet, but you still do the work, and allow yourself to not go down on yourself also for the experiments that maybe don't work perfectly. That doesn't mean that you don't have something to say.
I like to offer up the mantra that has carried me from Dorothy Redmore, and she said, baby, if you want to write, just write. I was like, well, that's kind of easy. So that has literally carried me over the last 5 years, when people kind of said, oh, you should just teach our children music. Not saying anything is against, being a music teacher, but, or closed doors, or, I applied to 5 different composition programs and got rejected from all of them. But that mantra has carried me, and so that's my advice to the generation behind me. Baby, if you want to write, just write.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to keep it real. I would say, honestly, this is for every budding artist, composer, knitter, yarn, whatever, sewing sweaters, whatever. Don't let results define you. Don't let outer things influence your self-worth, your inner worth. You may win the competition one day. You may lose the competition the next, but that doesn't change, who you are and what the creator made you. There's a song that I wrote got my first Emmy nomination. It's called Royalty. It says, God has made me who I am. I'm his child. I'm royalty. And so that's if I come in first place or if I come in last place, if I get that, hey, Dave, we like you, but we're not gonna get you, or no response at all. Remembering who you are and how God has made us. And I said something else too, but I forgot. See me later.
That's okay. Thank you. I would like to thank all of the composers. We're going to take a picture. We want to take a picture of you while you're on the stage. So if someone would be so kind as to get us a picture. Already done? You got all of them? Okay. He said, oh, Sean's going to do it. Would you? He's going to be in the next one. Can you all stand up, please? Thank you so much for your pearls of wisdom. And keep writing the music. We have Jasmine, Sean, Diane, Kyle, Gerald, Marvin. Did I miss any composers in the room that I didn't see? Where's my, I told her I would get in your next group. Yeah, there you are. Who? Where? You're a composer? Come on. Anybody else? Can I grab one more chair? We're good. Over here. It's over here. It's me. Oh, you're going to put it for Joseph over there. Sorry. You all go that way. So, this is group 2, in no particular order, but I'm glad to see all of you. And I'd like to ask you to start with the same question. If you'd introduce your name, who has inspired you, and the piece or pieces you're most proud of that you've already written. So can we start at that end, Joseph? I know you just got in the seat.
Okay, hello.
Hello. Your name?
So my name is Joe Williams, and I don't embrace the word composer, but I call myself a sound liberator because I feel like that's more inclusive to my artistry as a pianist and a curator and just multidisciplinary artist who also happens to improvise and compose. And I've just received one commission in my whole life, which was from Fort Worth Opera. General Director Afton Battle invited me to do some work, and I got amazing validation from Sean here. It was brilliant. And Jasmine sang some of that music as well. So that piece would probably be an arrangement of 4 women.
Great, thank you.
Hey everyone, my name's Mason Bynes, and I guess, I don't know, just as others had said, as Maria had said and others had said earlier, I have so many different inspirations, it's hard to name one. I grew up every weekend cleaning the house and listening to Kirk Franklin, or, but it was also balanced with, I was a huge choir nerd, and I loved choral music, and I loved sacred music, so but I also loved rock, and like, all of that was really kind of swirling around for me. I'd say 2 different pieces were like really substantial for me. One of them was called For Rosa. I wrote it for a New York brass ensemble called the Westerlies, and it was my first kind of big girl commission that I was like, wow, somebody really wants to hear what I have to say. And it was huge because we got to perform it at the Rosa Parks Day ceremony last year. And her attorney, Fred Gray, was there, and I was bawling the entire time. I just could not believe that that was something that God had graced me with. And then also Songs for the People, which was performed the other day by Joe and Dr. Wah. That piece I wrote in collaboration with the NATS mentoring program, where I got to work with Tom Giapullo, who had given me just so much kudos and so much support. And at the time, I really wanted to write about Black joy. We were all so isolated and so alone, and it was right when vaccines were being introduced, so there was like a glimmer of hope, and I just wanted to express Black joy with that piece, and it brings joy every time. So that's me.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. I'm Sean O'Pebolo, and so I grew up very poor in the projects, single mom, whole 9 yards, and it's a longer story. But when we were 6 years old, we started going to the Salvation Army, which has a huge music tradition, one of the biggest in any ecumenical denominations. And so I had these world-class musicians at my church, and including the famous band composer James Curnow. And so at an early age, 12, I started getting private lessons, free music lessons at the Salvation Army Church. I started before that as a brass player, age 6 or 7, but composition around age 11 or 12, or maybe 13. And so my music education was literally free music lessons at the Salvation Army. And I say that's the inspirations because y'all have no idea, or people have no idea how much impact one can have on somebody just by giving up your time and just to help people. So that's just so special to me. But I guess the piece that I didn't know as I was writing it, but it would be my two black churches probably because of what it's about and when it was written. It was premiered by Will Liverman, and it just the piece, the text to me is just what grabs me, and so I'll put my all in that. So I think that's the piece that I would say.
Okay. Sean and I have a lot in common, I would say, because that's like, you just like described me. I'm Jasmine Barnes. I'm a composer. I started as a vocalist first, but I didn't get into music seriously until college, until I went to Morgan State University. And so my first music theory lessons were there and everything, so I was really late to the party, you could say. But I was fortunate to be at a HBCU because I was literally led to, continue into things that I thought I was just trying out, right? Composition was something I was just trying out, but I was really inspired, and I had the kind of educators around me that actually cared about seeing me do more than what I was just doing. So that was important to me. Similar to Sean, when I was younger, and it wasn't directly in music, which is interesting, but it was in every other type of art, dance, literally visual arts, acting. I had free lessons all the time, all over Baltimore City. And for me, that just seeing and just knowing now, what that was for artists to really be given their time like that, I just know how valuable that is now, to give that kind of space. So I consider myself a product of believing in youth, right? I consider myself a product of investing your time into youth, and what can be. I would say my favorite composition that I've written thus far is, it's so hard to say. I might have to say it's actually one that hasn't been premiered yet, but it's written for Russell Thomas to be premiered next year at LA Opera, and I can't really say anything about it because it hasn't been premiered. But I enjoy it because it doesn't focus in on tragedy within the Black experience. It really talks about like the sensual and loving side of Black people that people don't often tell the story of. So that's all I could say. But,
Is it a set of poems, or
yes, a set of poems, and the text is by Deborah Deep Mouton, who I met in American Lyric Theater, which I'm in my second year in residency with American Lyric Theater.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Diane White Clayton, and the first question of who influenced me the most, I, like everybody else almost who said, I cannot name one person. But to answer the question, I want to just highlight, well, first, yes, the Black church, absolutely, my nemesis, my growing up, my foundation, not nemesis, my genesis. Maybe was that a Freudian slip? No. My genesis, my roots.
I wasn't gonna go there.
That's very funny. Seriously though, all of who I am in so many levels is because of the blessing of being raised in the church where my dad was the pastor, none the least of which is the musician that I am. But I will say also the classical European tradition, the many African American composers that I got a chance to hear who compose in the classical tradition. But I will name one in particular in the second of the two pieces I will talk about of my own that I am, I guess, most proud of, or that I like the most. The first is called Clap Praise. It's my most famous piece, and proud of it because I think I try usually just to write what's in my heart, but it very much is a synthesis of who I am as a woman of African descent and as a classically trained composer. And it's just has a lot of Africanisms in it, and it just is me without apology or explanation, and that's how we should live. Then the second piece I want to make note of was just premiered this year. It's called Many Mansions, and it was a commission by the Boston Landmarks Orchestra. And they asked me in particular to use the spiritual in Bright Mansions, a la Roland Carter, and to change it into an orchestral setting a la Nathaniel Dett's Chariots Jubilee. And so I will mention Roland Carter as a major influence before I ever met him. And when I did meet him, I was just going, and when I received this, he since has become a dear, dear person in my heart and life and friend. And when I received this commission to just hear his voice say, "Yes, dear, you have my blessing," and every part of the way, just his undergirding and being that wind beneath my wings. I wrote it. It was commissioned, as I said earlier. It was actually commissioned a couple years ago to be premiered during once COVID hit. That change. It was supposed to be premiered in 2020. But I mention it because I love, love, love the spirituals. I mention it because I got a chance to spend so much time in this piece I already knew, Roland Carter's In Bright Mansions, and it didn't, of course, it needs nothing, so I was not going to try to rewrite what was already written. But to be able to extract it and dissect it and rewrite it in the midst of a time when death was all around us, because the majority of the writing I was doing in 2020. So when the line says, "I want to live," all I could think of was what George Floyd would have sung had he had the air to sing it. And so there were times when I was writing it where I was just on my knees in tears and just broken apart, and all of that is felt in the piece. At least that's what my prayer was, and that's what people told me when they heard it. So, Many Mansions, it's a shameless plug. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, Kyle.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kyle Wooten. I'm the Associate Director of Choral Activities at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And it is very liberating for me to talk about myself as a composer. So much of my energy has gone to conducting, and ever since I've been able to carve out a musical life for myself, that's where my energy has gone. And I often tell people I came to composition through the back door, and honestly, I have two people to thank, for that. And thank you so much, Dr. Louise Toppin and Dr. Darrell Taylor, who encouraged me to really expand my musical mind and composition by way through the George Shirley competition in 2018. So much of my life in composition is an intersection of my influences in gospel music and neo soul. And so I grew up literally wearing out Jill Scott Words and Sounds Volume 1. So if you know, you know all the major and minor 7 chords of a life, okay? But also because, I'm a church kid, and so I've been playing the organ ever since I was 6, and listening to Kirk Franklin and Fred Hammond. And I'm going to lift up, particularly because I'm from Philadelphia, I'm going to lift up the name of Dr. Becky M. Carlton. who was the leader of the Sanctuary Church Recording Choir in Philadelphia, and she was from Greensboro, North Carolina. And my research line of Black women composers is due mostly to the music of Black women being so lovingly interwoven into the fabric of my life, and so much of, I don't know if Sylvia is still in the room, but thank you so much for lifting up the power of the elementary school experience, because I did not have music in school beyond the elementary school, and so much of my musical life was being self-taught and making my way to undergrad. And I wasn't a music major right away. I was a journalism major, thinking that I was going to be a magazine editor. And so I have Dr. Albert Lee. I don't know if he's in the room, but my first voice teacher was Dr. Albert Lee, and he helped me form out a musical space for myself and gave me that psychological safety to explore myself as a musician. So if I had two pieces that I'm quite proud of, the first of which you may have heard in the 10 a.m. set is called When Summer Goes, which is a part of the song set called A Journey in Love. And a tenor bass chorus piece I wrote in 2017 in honor of the life of my deceased brother Brandon, called Sancta Maria.
Thank you. Jarrell? We have two other composers who have joined us. Jarrell.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jarrell R. Gray. I'm originally from Chicago. Two people who influenced me the most, I would say, is Arnold Severe, who was my piano teacher as a child. He studied under Dr. Robert Morris, and Charles Lloyd Jr., who was and is or was both my mentor as well as my applied professor at Southern University. That's who I studied with. 3 or 4 pieces of mine I would have to say that are most influential and that I'm most proud of. The first I would say is the Serenity Prayer. I set that after my mother died. Another piece that I wrote in honor to her in that morning, which has not been premiered yet, but I'm quite proud of that. The Soul of America, which was performed yesterday by Sir Donnie Ray Albert, who I did not write that piece with him in mind, but truly that is his piece, I must say. And what else? It was one more. I said Serenity. So I'll just go with those. I'll say those 3 for sure. I would say one that was commissioned this summer, Elizabeth Freeman, Mumbet's song. Elizabeth Freeman was the first slave woman who sued for her freedom and won. And so I was commissioned by Julia Carey to set that to art song, and that hasn't been premiered either due to COVID issues. But I would say that those are some of the pieces that have made me most proud to date.
My name is Marvin Mills. I'm an organist first. I'll say that. Those that inspired me, I really think I have to give credit to most of my music teachers before college. Middle school, junior high school, and high school. Miriam Wilson was the choir director at the junior high school, where we sang Hall Johnson and Chester Harrison, etc. And high school, Italo Taranto, who our music class covered the gambit of what you could study in music. So by the time I got to college, and my organ teacher, and another teacher who was a mentor who helped me secure church jobs before college. By the time I got to college, the sky was the limit. I was fully beyond prepared because of those people. Of course, I didn't realize that at the time.
And a piece that you're inspired
Well,
about?
the other inspiration I have to say, as an organist, which is why I said that, is Johann Sebastian Bach.
Yeah.
I've played the complete organ works of Bach in a series of 14 concerts, which was life-changing. The piece of mine, I guess, that I'm proudest of was a commission from the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York. They had an annual Poets Corner, and that particular year they wanted to break it up because usually it was papers and lectures and conversations. They wanted music, but the poet they had on the docket they couldn't find any music for, and it was Phyllis Wheatley, who as an elementary school kid I learned all about and was fascinated by all of that. So on Virtue, that particular piece. And I'm like Maria, very much. I haven't gotten there yet, Maria, owning being a composer, because I've done more arranging than composing. That was only the second original piece that I wrote. So.
Thank you. Byron?
I'm Byron J. Smith, the chair of the music department at Los Angeles Harbor College. Here in Southern California, and I just want to say diddle, 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 diddle. Diddle, diddle. You know, my experience here in California, we don't have HBCUs, unfortunately, and I studied at Long Beach State. And my choral teacher, he's a very influential person, Frank Pooler, was actually the music director for the Carpenters. So if you listen to a lot of my music, some of those Carpenter harmonies in there, because that's my upbringing, you know, we can do a nice, you know, breathy wah, you know, and there's some things that are in there. But after I did my undergrad, I had the pleasure of one of the members of, who's actually in the spirit crowd, took me to meet a gentleman by name of Dr. Albert McNeil. And so in that experience, the class of '85 that Daryl and I both were part of, joining the Jubilee Singers in '85, that gave me my exposures. Now in the church, diddle, 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 you know, going to some of the, a big church, African-American church, I was exposed to our Nathaniel Detts and some of those type of things. So those mentors include Don Lee White and others who exposed me to that type of music. In terms of my compositions, I'm mostly known for doing gospel. I have quite a few gospel pieces that are sung all over the world. They're not necessarily my favorite because it's business, and Rosephine.
Well, what's the one that touches your heart, though?
The ones that touch my heart, the two things. There's one piece that I actually wrote with Celeste years ago. Well, she was in mine, and she's on the CD. It's called "Use Me, Lord," and we were in her. It's kind of like the testimony to all that I do, and we were in her living room working on that. And that's been 20, 30 years ago. And probably the most influential piece also is a musical. I've written probably about 6 musicals. And there's one musical that was entitled One that was premiered with gospel artist Daryl Coley. And some of that music I listened to and I said, wow. Now writing for Daryl Coley, sometimes you can just hold a note and it's good, but the creativity of it, and some of you NAM members, we did part of it back in 2003, because if you recall, we had Daryl Coley as a soloist. But I think that's one of my biggest inspirational works that didn't make it to Broadway, but you know, one of these days.
Thank you, Byron. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Charles Ingram, and I am a native of Gulfport, Mississippi. And that's where I got my primary start, with a wonderful high school choral director who was very encouraging. It allowed me to use the choir to experiment with writing choral things. And probably the first piece that I really wrote, I guess I was probably a sophomore in high school, and it was an anthem, spiritual anthem called "Sing His Praises." And I knew that it sounded okay because I was working with the choir and all that, but I didn't know if it was really any good. And so, some point, well, you know, your teachers always tell you almost everything you do is good. But there was, at that time, I guess it was 1968 or so, the Mississippi State Arts Council had a statewide composition contest, and I submitted it, and everything was anonymous, and I won first place. I said, how in the world did I do that? But basically, once I found out that I could kind of do that, I went on and worked more and more on it. As far as pieces, well, growing up at that time and in an all-black high school, lots of spirituals, lots of Chester Harrison, lots of Hall Johnson and Det and all these people. One piece that I say that changed my musical worldview when I heard it, I had never heard it before, was the second movement of Maurice Ravel's G major piano concerto. When I heard that, everything just kind of, I said, wow, what in the world is this? I must have been about 18 years old then. As far as my pieces, for some strange reason, my instrumental pieces have kind of become, I guess, go-to pieces in the brass and woodwind world. My publishers always tell me, "Hey, this piece is on this national contest list, and this piece is on this international contest list." And I say, "Wow, okay, thanks for telling me that." But the two pieces come to mind. One's my last commission. A few months ago from Miami University of Oxford, Ohio. And it was a setting of Paul Lawrence Dunbar's A Golden Day for SSA and piano. And every time I hear the last four measures of that, I smile. I said, wow, this is pretty good. The rest of it is probably okay too. But the other piece is I wrote several years ago. I wrote another commission for a clarinetist called Mississippi Gulf Coast Suite. And if you know anything about Gulfport, it's on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. And probably the movement that I like most and that touches me most is the third movement, and it's called 8:30:05. And it's kind of cryptic, but that's when Hurricane Katrina tore through the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And so it's an homage to the victims of Hurricane Katrina. Not very long, it's probably, that movement may be a minute and a half, and I utilize Amazing Grace in it. And that always touches me whenever I hear it played. And I've heard it played very beautifully by different people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know we're at time, but I want to ask you three really quick questions. One, if you raise your hand, if primary instrument is piano. Can you raise them high if you started as a pianist? Okay. How many, if you lower your hands, how many started as a singer? Okay, singer. Does anybody else, thank you, can you put your hands down? Any other instrument that you started with, your primary? What was your primary instrument?
The euphonium.
That's right, you were euphonium and your organ. No, you had another one. Violin. So again, though, we're a lot of singers or pianists. So I won't ask a question about the longevity of singing, but I did want to, of the art song, but I did want to ask, Diane opened the door a little bit with talking about 2020 changed for her. Just three or four of you, how did 2020 to now change your composition? Yes, Jasmine. Raise your hand if you like. Jasmine, Kyle, Jarrell, Byron, can you all answer that question, please?
Okay. 2020 actually, I feel like, was the start of my real composition career. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of organizations and institutions were actually starting to be interested in Black voices as composers, whereas before there wasn't a lot of interest, or there was interest, but it was like, I don't know, it wasn't, yeah, it was, yeah. So if I'm being honest, Yeah.
Good. Go ahead. He needs one too. Go ahead. Kyle, Jarrell, Byron. Did you want a Mason? Did you want to weigh in? Mason?
I could.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Jasmine. That's when I met Jasmine also, and it was online, and like so many other people here. But that's the year that I wrote for Rosa, and I had to sit there and, like you were saying earlier, like having to grapple with all of the chaos that was around me. I live in Boston. I work at Berkeley as a career services advisor, if anybody needs like a workshop. But the National Guard was outside of my apartment. There were fireworks. The cops were outside. They were boarding up all of the buildings because of all of the chaos. And I had to sit there and ask myself, how authentic do you want to be? How real do you want to be about all of these emotions that you're having to emote, but all of the ways that you're honoring Rosa Parks, all of the people that you're standing on the shoulders of, and being able to present that on Rosa Parks Day in front of her attorney. Insane.
And for all of you, you felt that it needed to be a vocal work rather than necessarily something else?
Text is so wonderful, just saying.
Exactly.
This may be a controversial statement coming from a composer, but as soon as you add text to a piece of music, it becomes the most important part. And yeah, so I'll just stop there. You can disagree with me if you want, but text is so powerful. So,
as a singer, I kind of appreciate that.
Right, you know.
Trying to get it in there, Kyle.
Aside from the goings on of the world, 2020 brought on two specific things for me. So the first thing was starting writing the first 3 chapters of my dissertation on the cantatas of Lena McLin. And by the time I finished that dissertation, y'all, like, I felt like I can do anything. Like, so, and it was a joy to write, even though that was a very isolating year, notwithstanding global health crisis and just the goings on of like a terminal year in the doctoral program. The other thing was, so my side research hustle is like psychological safety for choirs. And so I feel like to do anything new or to do anything that's considered, I don't know, life-changing or personally meaningful, we need psychological safety first. And so I got a lot of psychological safety in the inaugural cohort of the Nats Composers Mentorship Fellowship. A lot of the composers are actually here at the conference. Shout out to you, Alan. That gave me, and even though so much of it was virtual, the learning and the togetherness, but giving myself permission as a composer to maybe to write in a hellish key or to explore time signatures or to look for other text sources or to really dig deep inside to tell a story that I really wanted to tell. And so the story I found was in a chain of text messages with me and my mother. And so having that personal meaning for me helped me survive 2020 as a composer.
That's interesting. Jarrell, you said you wanted
to piggyback off of that, 2020 was quite a new start for me. 19 again, my mother passed, and I lost the drive and momentum to write, right? And in that agony and in that pain, I recalled the Serenity Prayer that I had said in ICU with my mother so much. And so one of my friends said, why don't you submit it for the George Shirley competition? And I said, well, no. I said, I don't know. I said, the way I'm feeling and what I'm writing, I said, I don't know. I said, it's not traditional writing. I said, I don't know if it'll even be looked at or considered serious. And long story short, I submitted it, and that's where I met Dr. Louise Toppin, in which that piece won first place. And I was quite elated and blessed to find that out. And so from there, it sparked it. I became quite serious about writing. It changed. You know, prior to that, I'd been writing and had pieces with Hal Leonard and different things, but I was writing to be quite honest and frank, to fit what was generally always done. And that was the mode of writing spirituals and writing arrangements and what they felt would sell. And then after 2020 and being isolated, and certainly after the George Shirley competition, the opportunity to be in the Nats mentorship program with so many of the other composers in here, myself, and so many of them chose deliberate texts because they were honoring all black composers within that year. We chose black texts. I chose, after hearing John Lewis's last words read on the news by Morgan Freeman, I chose that text deliberately to adapt into an art song. And so, a long story short, 2020 made it a serious ordeal to write.
I appreciate that. As Byron's getting ready to say, I'm so proud of both Kyle and Jarrell being George Shirley first place winners. Our composition part of the competition has only been going 5 years, and 2 of them are here. That says a lot about the young people who enter, so I'm proud of them. Byron.
I don't know about you, but 2020 was rough. 2020 was difficult for all of us because we just didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring. But 2020 was a renaissance in terms of new birth of creativity, give us a chance to come inside. I'm not, hopefully I don't sound like a preacher, but I mean, really, because it was rough. Even before 2020, I don't know if any of you people who publish and things, but the Obama years was a little rough for black music because a lot of people didn't feel like they needed to program it because we had a black president. And I don't know if you experienced that, but I have a publishing company and it was getting real slow during those years. But after that times and all the things that we have, as a people, have gone through, 2020 really just opened our eyes and made us at the peak of our creativity. I really have been in a little funk, and then I was kind of running this organization. Didn't have time to, 6 years of my life.
National President of NAM.
Yeah, so
yes.
Thank you. But as I got out of that and slid into that 2020, new music started to happen, and hope is the most important word that became part of it. So, just keep hope alive, folks, because, we can get through a lot of things, and there are great things that are in store.
Absolutely. So I want to do a really quick run all the way down with your advice to those coming behind you. I know some of you are newer in the career, and some are more seasoned, like me. We're seasoned people. Somebody said that's code for old. I don't appreciate that. I don't take that. I know. So let's do a quick round all the way from Joseph down. Give a very quick, what is your advice you'd give to someone who wants to become a composer?
I think the best piece of advice I could give is make sure you are embodied in your expression and hydrated and well taken care of, and make sure you have community around you.
Thank you.
I'd maybe say 2 things I've learned that I would pass on is don't tell yourself no before somebody else even has the chance to tell you no. And then also embrace uncertainty. When you embrace uncertainty, even things that are insane and wild and unfortunate exist on the same plane as things that are spontaneous and exciting and beautiful. And Deepak Chopra kind of talks about that in his 7 spiritual laws of success, if anyone wants to read it.
Thank you.
Just real quick, develop meaningful relationships and be kind.
Great.
I would say, don't think people are lying to you if they give you a compliment. Just take the compliment.
Yes, accept the compliment.
Take the compliment.
Yes.
And one more thing, perfection is a myth.
Okay. Diane?
I would say to be fully who you are. I was told once as an artist, well, you're too white to fit in a black setting and too black to fit in a white setting. And I said, thank you. I am who I am. I didn't make myself, but I choose to respond to what the Creator has put inside me. So please be fully who you are, and it's okay, because if you're not you, who else is going to be?
2 things that I like to lift up. The first one is a Zora Neale Hurston quote. There are years that ask questions and years that answer So stay the course. Number two, be open to the wisdom of the elders and ancestors who have been where you're trying to go.
I would say write from your heart and write what God gives you. Write intentionally, write from the depths of your soul. And the wonderful thing about this conference and this panel is that you have so many different generations encouraging as we sit amongst one another, and even getting the opportunity to encourage those who may want to also do what it is that we're doing. But write what God gives you, whether it makes sense to the masses or not. Right.
Ditto, ditto, ditto. Be prepared when the knock comes.
What makes a hit? A piece that someone else likes.
I have found that it's easy to be concerned about what people don't like. I remember a few years ago, I had 5 songs premiered, 3 on Elizabethan text and 2 on Langston Hughes text. And someone came up and said, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll cut that off. I'll leave you in suspense. But basically, write what you write and let the chips fall where they may.
I'd like to thank all of these composers. Please take a photo. Somebody take a photo. Would you all stand, please? Come on, Dave. Stand. They're taking a photo of you.
Professional.
As you can see, you got it, Dave? As you can see, there's much wisdom from all of them in the room. The conversation we could have had forever, but we have other places to go. My piece of advice is pay it forward. Whatever you do, pay it forward. Mentor back, pay it forward. Have a good rest of your day. It's been my honor.